Siona God, hello all. Oshta, afternoon, good afternoon, and Wado, thank you for watching. So this is day 2, part B of reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, an Inquiry into Values by Robert M. Pirsig. And I, right before this, got a big ball of dough ready, and it's rising right now to make a loaf of bread for our daughter. But I had a little mishap. I got some flour in my hair, and then I realized I got like some dough on my fingers, on my hands. I thought I got everything all off, but hey. So we're just gonna be adults about it, aren't we? All right, the first time this one seized, my head was pitched over the front wheel and my passenger was almost on top of me. Oof. At about 30, it freed up again and started to run, but I pulled off the road and stopped to see what was wrong. All my passenger could think to say was, "What did you do that for?" I shrugged and was as puzzled as he was and stood there with the cars whizzing by, just staring. The engine was so hot the air around it shimmered, and we could feel the heat radiate. When I put a wet finger on it, it sizzled like a hot iron, and we rode home slowly. With a new sound, a slap that meant the pistons no longer fit and an overhaul was needed. I took this machine into a shop because I thought it wasn't important enough to justify getting into myself, having to learn all the complicated details and maybe having to order parts and special tools and all that time-dragging stuff when I could get someone else to do it in less time, sort of John's attitude. The shop was a different scene from the ones I remembered. The mechanics, who had once all seemed like ancient veterans, now looked like children. A radio was going full blast, and they were clowning around and talking and seemed not to notice me. When one of them finally came over, he barely listened to the piston slap before saying, "Oh yeah, tappets." Tappets? I should have known then what was coming. 2 weeks later, I paid their bill for $140, rode the cycle carefully at varying low speeds to wear it in, and then after 1,000 miles, opened it up. At about 75, it seized again and freed at 30, the same as before. When I brought it back, they accused me of not breaking it in properly, but after much argument agreed to look into it. They overhauled it again, and this time took it out themselves for a high-speed road test. It seized on them this time. After the third overhaul, 2 months later, they replaced the cylinders, put in oversized main carburetor jets, retarded the timing to make it run as coolly as possible, and told me, "Don't run it fast." And that was in quotes. It was covered with grease and did not start. I found the plugs were disconnected, connected them, and started it, and now there really was a tappet noise. They hadn't adjusted them. I pointed this out, and the kid came with an open-end adjustable wrench, set wrong, and swiftly rounded both of the sheet aluminum tappet covers, ruining both of them. My lord. In quotes, "I hope we've got some more of those in stock," he said. I nodded. He brought out a hammer and a cold chisel and started to pound them loose. The chisel punched through the aluminum cover, and I could see he was pounding the chisel right into the engine head. Oh my gosh. On the next blow, he missed the chisel completely and struck the head with the hammer, breaking off a portion of 2 of the cooling fins. Jesus. "Just stop," I said politely, feeling this was a bad dream. "Just give me some new covers and I'll take it the way it is." I got out of there as fast as possible. Noisy tappets, shot tappet covers, greasy machine down the road, and then felt a bad vibration at speeds over 20. At the curb, I discovered 2 of the 4 engine mounting bolts were missing, and a nut was missing from the 3rd. Lord. The whole engine was hanging on by only 1 bolt. The overhead cam chain tensioner bolt was also missing, meaning it would have been hopeless to try to adjust the tappets anyway. Nightmare. The thought of John putting his BMW into the hands of one of those people is something I have never brought up with him. Maybe I should. I found the cause of the seizures a few weeks later, waiting to happen again. It was a little 25-cent pin in the internal oil delivery system that had been sheared and was preventing oil from reaching the head at high speeds. The question why comes back again and again and has become a major reason for wanting to deliver this to Takwa. Why did they butcher it so? These were not people running away from technology like John and Sylvia. These were the technologists themselves. They sat down to do a job and they performed it like chimpanzees. Nothing personal in it. There was no obvious reason for it, and I tried to think back into that shop, that nightmare place, to try to remember anything that could have been the cause. The radio was a clue. You can't really think hard about what you're doing and listen to the radio at the same time. Maybe they didn't see their job as having anything to do with hard thought, just wrench twiddling. If you can twiddle wrenches while listening to the radio, that's more enjoyable. Their speed was another clue. They were really slopping things around in a hurry and not looking where they slopped them. More money that way, if you don't stop to think that it usually takes longer or comes out worse. But the biggest clue seemed to be their expressions. They were hard to explain, good-natured, friendly, easygoing, and uninvolved. They were like spectators. You had the feeling that they had just wandered in there themselves and somebody had handed them a wrench. There was no identification with the job, no saying, "I am a mechanic," end quotes. At 5 p.m. on whenever their at 5 p.m. or whenever their 8 hours were in, you knew they would cut it off and not have another thought about their work. They were already trying not to have any thoughts about their work on the job. In their own way, they were achieving the same thing John and Sylvia were, living with technology without really having anything to do with it. Or rather, they had something to do with it, but their own selves were outside of it, detached, removed. They were involved in it, but not in such a way as to care. Not only did these mechanics not find that sheared pin, but it was clearly a mechanic who had sheared it in the first place by assembling the side cover plate improperly. I remembered the previous owner had said a mechanic had told him the plate was hard to get on. That was why. The shop manual had warned about this. But like the others, he was probably in too much of a hurry, or he didn't care. While at work, I was thinking about this same lack of care in the digital computer manuals I was editing. Writing and editing technical manuals is what I do for a living. The other 11 months of the year, and I knew they were full of errors, ambiguities, omissions, and information so completely screwed up, you had to read them 6 times to make any sense out of them. But what struck me for the first time was the agreement of these manuals with the spectator attitude I had seen in the shop. These were spectator manuals. It was built in the format of them. Implicit in every line is the idea that, in quotes, here is the machine isolated in time and in space from everything else in the universe. It has no relationship to you. You have no relationship to it, other than to turn certain switches, maintain voltage levels, check for error conditions, end quote, and so on. That's it. The mechanics and their attitude toward the machine, were really taking no different attitude from the manuals toward the machine, or from the attitude I had when I brought it in there. We were all spectators. And it occurred to me, there is no manual that deals with the real business of motorcycle maintenance. The most important aspect of all, caring about what you are doing, is considered either unimportant or taken for granted. On this trip, I think we should notice it, explore it a little, to see if in that strange separation of what man is from what man does, we may have some clues as to what the heck HE double hockey 6 has gone wrong in this 20th century. I don't want to hurry it. That itself is a poisonous 20th century attitude. When you want to hurry something, that means you no longer care about it and want to get on to other things. I just want to get at it slowly but carefully and thoroughly. With the same attitude I remember was present just before I found that sheared pin. It was that attitude that found it, nothing else. I suddenly noticed the land here has flattened into a Euclidean plane. Not a hill, not a bump anywhere. This means we have entered the Red River Valley. We will soon be in the Dakotas. Chapter 3. By the time we are out of the Red River Valley, the storm clouds are everywhere and almost upon us. John and I have discussed the situation in Breckenridge and decided to keep going until we have to stop. That shouldn't be long now. The sun is gone, the wind is blowing cold, and a wall of differing shades of gray looms around us. It seems huge, overpowering. The prairie here is huge, but above it, the hugeness of this ominous gray mass ready to descend is frightening. We are traveling at its mercy now. When and where it will come is nothing we can control. All we can do is watch it move in closer and closer. Where the darkest gray has come down to the ground, a town that was seen earlier, some small buildings, and a water tower has disappeared. It will be on us soon now. I don't see any towns ahead, and we are just going to have to run for it. I pull up alongside John and throw my hand ahead in a quote-unquote speed-up gesture. He nods and opens up. I let him get ahead a little, then pick up to his speed. The engine responds beautifully. 70, 80, 85. We are really feeling the wind now, and I drop my head to cut down the resistance. 90. The speedometer needle swings back and forth, but the tach reads a steady 9,000, about 95 miles an hour. And we would hold this speed, moving. Too fast to focus on the shoulder of the road now. I reach forward and flip the headlight switch just for safety. But it is needed anyway. It is getting very dark. We whiz through the flat open land. Not a car anywhere, hardly a tree. But the road is smooth and clean, and the engine now has a quote-unquote packed high RPM sound that says it's right on. It's getting darker and darker. A flash and ka-wham of thunder, one right on top of the other. That shook me, and Chris has got his head against my back now. A few warning drops of rain at this speed. They are like needles. A second flash. Wham! And everything brilliant. And then in the brilliance of the next flash, that farmhouse, that windmill. Oh my God. He's been here. Throttle off. This is his road. A fence and trees, and the speed drops to 70, then 60, to 55, and I hold it there. Why are we slowing down? Chris shouts. Too fast. No, it isn't. I nod yes. The house and water tower have gone by, and then a small drainage ditch appears, and a crossroad leading off to the horizon. Yes, that's right, I think. That's exactly right. They're way ahead of us, Chris hollers. Speed up. I turn my head from side to side. Why not? He hollers. Not safe. They're gone. They'll wait. Speed up. No, I shake my head. It's just a feeling on a cycle. You can trust them, and we stay at 55. You trust them, excuse me. And we stay at 55. The first rain begins now, but up ahead, I see the lights of a town. I knew it would be there. When we arrive, John and Sylvia are there under the first tree by the road waiting for us. What happened to you? Slowed down. Well, we know that. Something wrong? No, let's get out of the rain. John says there's a motel at the other end of town, but I tell him there's a better one if you turn right at a row of cottonwoods a few blocks down. We turn at the cottonwoods and travel a few blocks, and a small motel appears inside the office. John looks around and says, "This is a good place. When were you here before?" "I don't remember," I say. "Then how did you know about this?" "Intuition." He looks at Sylvia and shakes his head. Sylvia has been watching me silently for some time. She notices my hands are unsteady as I sign in. "You look awfully pale," she says. "Did that lightning shake you up?" "No." "You look like you'd seen a ghost." John and Chris look at me, and I turn away from them to the door. It is still raining hard, but we make a run for it to the rooms. The gear on the cycles is protected, and we wait until the storm passes over before removing it. After the rain stops, the sky lightens a little. But from the motel courtyard, I see past the cottonwoods that a second darkness, that of night, is about to come. We walk into town, have supper, And by the time we get back, the fatigue of the day is really on me. We rest almost motionless in the mental armchairs of the motel courtyard, slowly working down a pint of whiskey that John brought with some mix from the motel cooler. It goes down slowly and agreeably. A cool night wind rattles the leaves of the cottonwoods along the road. Chris wonders what we should do next. Nothing tires this kid. The newness and strangeness of the motel surroundings excite him, and he wants us to sing songs as they did at camp. We're not very good at songs, John says. Let's tell stories then, Chris says. He thinks for a while. Do you know any good ghost stories? All the kids in our cabin used to tell ghost stories at night. You tell us some, John says. And he does. They are kind of fun to hear. Some of them I haven't heard since I was his age. I tell him so, and Chris wants to hear some of mine, but I can't remember any. After a while, he says, do you believe in ghosts? No, I say. Why not? Because they are unscientific. He spaced it out. The way I say this makes John smile. They contain no matter, I continue, and have no energy, and therefore, according to the laws of science, do not exist except in people's minds. End quote. The whiskey, the fatigue, and the wind and the trees start mixing in my mind. Of course, I add. The laws of science contain no matter and have no energy either, and therefore do not exist except in people's minds. It's best to be completely scientific about the whole thing and refuse to believe in either ghosts or the laws of science. That way you're safe. That doesn't leave you very much to believe in, but that's scientific too. I don't know what you're talking about, Chris says. I'm being kind of facetious. Chris gets frustrated when I talk like this, but I don't think it hurts him. One of the kids at YMCA camp says he believes in ghosts. He was just spoofing you. No, he wasn't. He said that when people haven't been buried right, their ghosts come back to haunt people. He really believes in that. He was just spoofing you, I repeat. What's his name? Sylvia says. Tom Whitebear. John and I exchanged looks, suddenly recognizing the same thing. Oh, Indian, he says. I laugh. I guess I'm going to have to take that back a little, I say. I was thinking of European ghosts. What's the difference? John roars with laughter. He's got you, he says. I think a little and say, well, Indians sometimes have a different way of looking at things, which I'm not saying is completely wrong. Science isn't part of the Indian tradition. Tom Whitebear said his mother and dad told him not to believe all that stuff, but he said his grandmother whispered it was true anyway, so he believes it. He looks at me pleadingly. He really does want to know things sometimes. Being facetious is not being a very good father. Sure, I say, reversing myself. I believe in ghosts too. Now John and Sylvia look at me peculiarly. I see I'm not going to get out of this one easily and brace myself for a long explanation. It's completely natural, I say. To think of Europeans who believed in ghosts or Indians who believed in ghosts is ignorant. The scientific point of view has wiped out every other view to a point where they all seem primitive, so that if a person today talks about ghosts or spirits, he is considered ignorant or maybe nutty. It's just all but completely impossible to imagine a world where ghosts can actually exist. End quote. John nods affirmatively, and I continue. My own opinion is that the intellect of modern man isn't that superior. IQs aren't that much different. Those Indians and medieval men were just as intelligent as we are, but the context in which they thought was completely different. Within that context, I thought ghosts and spirits are quite as real as atoms, particles, photons, and quaints are to a modern man. In that sense, I thought I was going to say quarks, but anyway, in that sense, I believe in ghosts. Modern man has his ghosts and spirits too, you know. What? Oh, the laws of physics and of logic, the number system, the principle of algebraic substitution. These are ghosts. We just believe in them so thoroughly they seem real. They seem real to me, John says. I don't get it, says Chris. So I go on. For example, it seems completely natural to presume that gravitation and the law of gravitation existed before Isaac Newton. It would sound nutty to think that until the 17th century there was no gravity. Of course. So when did this law start? Has it always existed? John is frowning, wondering what I'm getting at. What I'm driving at, I say, is the notion that before the beginning of the earth, before the sun and the stars were formed, before the primal generation of anything, the law of gravity existed. Sure. Sitting there having no mass of its own, no energy of its own, not in anyone's mind because there wasn't anyone, not in space because there was no space either, not anywhere. This law of gravity still existed? Now John seems not so sure. If that law of gravity existed, I say, I honestly don't know what a thing has to do to be non-existent. It seems to me that the law of gravity has passed every test of non-existence there is. You cannot think of a single attribute of non-existence that law of gravity didn't have, or a single scientific attribute of existence it did have, and yet it is still common sense to believe that it existed. John says, I guess I'd have to think about it. Well, I predict that if you think about it long enough, you'll find yourself going round and round and round and round until you finally reach only one possible rational, intelligent conclusion. The law of gravity and gravity itself did not exist before Isaac Newton. No other conclusion makes sense. And what that means, I say, before he can interrupt, and what that means is that that law of gravity exists nowhere except in people's heads. It's a ghost. We are all of us very arrogant and conceited about running down other people's ghosts, but just as ignorant and barbaric and superstitious about our own. Why does everybody believe in the law of gravity then? Mass hypnosis, in a very orthodox form known as education.